Okay, Desiree, are we getting ready to start?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I've got your recording started.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and call this work session to order on Anchorage Institutions during the time of COVID-19 Roundtable. Let's go ahead and start with a roll call.
Miss Allard. Mr. Constant.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Miss Kennedy.
Here.
Miss LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Presverdia. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Miss Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Weddleton. Miss Zalatel.
Here.
Okay. Miss Allard, are you present? Mr. Presverdia? And Mr. Weddleton? You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you so much, Desiree. Before I get into it, a couple things. We have a lot of folks who are at this meeting, so thanks everyone for attending. If you can make sure that everyone is on mute until it is your time to speak, that will help with any background noises. And then second, for assembly members, as usual, please put yourself in the chat if you would like to get in the queue to speak. So this is the third of 4 roundtables the Assembly has hosted to continue to inform our COVID-19 response. Last week, we held our first 2 roundtables focusing on business and housing impacts. Impacts to some of our quintessential Anchorage institutions have also dominated headlines over the past several weeks. Today, we have a series of panels to dive deep into just a few of these institutions. Shelter for People Experiencing Homelessness are nonprofits, which during normal times provide essential services to members of our community, and our higher education institutions. I look forward to hearing from our panelists and seeing how they can inform the work we will be doing over the next few weeks and months as we develop our response to COVID-19 in light of the federal stimulus heading our way. Before I go into the agenda, and my colleagues have already heard this, but I want to state the obvious. We could probably spend all day on this topic and hold a separate 3 hours meeting on each of the panels we are hearing today. This is certainly not meant to be the end of our exploration, but a place for us to start collectively as an assembly before we begin exploring and fashioning our own ideas. As one of the presenters of last week's meetings stated, these meetings assist us in developing a common foundation for us to build upon. With that, I'm going to go ahead and go through the agenda for today's roundtable. So first, when I am done, we are going to have a discussion on shelters and how they are operating right now in light of COVID-19, and then any changes into the future. We're going to start off with Jasmine Boyle, the Executive Director of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. And then Jasmine will be doing a quote unquote roll call of the different shelters. I think we have possibly 8 different shelters on the line to speak with us today. Then we're going to be hearing from the Homelessness Resource Advisory Council. I believe we have Holly Cannon and Sean Ryan to speak with us. Then we will move on to a discussion on impacts to nonprofits, disruption of services, and changes because of COVID-19. We have Michelle Brown, the President and CEO of United Way of Anchorage, Lori Wolf, President and CEO of the Foraker Group, and Nina Kimple, President and CEO of the Alaska Community Foundation, who will kick off that conversation. Then, similar to the roundtable we had with businesses, we're going to be hearing from a few of our nonprofits, including Jim Baldwin, the CEO of the Food Bank of Alaska, Barbara Dubovich, the CEO of Campfire Alaska, Alan Boudall, the Executive Director of Lutheran Social Services, and Rebecca Parker, the Executive Director of the Anchorage Senior Center. Then we will end with a discussion on impacts to UAA and APU due to COVID-19. We have Valerie Davidson, the president of APU, and Kathleen Sandine, the chancellor of UAA. So with that, we're going to go ahead, turn back to Jasmine Boyle with the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness to give us a broad context for a discussion on homelessness shelters.
Thank you, Chair Rivera, and thank you to the Assembly for including us in such an important conversation. I'm going to do my best to share some slides with you, so please bear with me. Can you guys see what I'm projecting?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. We are going to focus this conversation, and I'm going to attempt to be brief because we have such a panel of presenters today. We're going to focus this conversation as requested on shelter. I do want to make a plug that the coalition is finalizing its gap analysis and 2021 priorities, and that will be a view of the entire continuum, not just the shelter system. Much of the data I'm going to share with you in my brief chat to kick this off is data that I hope you are all somewhat familiar with because none of this is new information. What you can see in front of you here is some results of our point-in-time count. Of note, the 2020 point-in-time count results have not been released as a final product. Housing and Urban Development at the national level gave the entire country a 4-month extension due to COVID. So these are numbers up to 2019. We will update this with 2020 information and include that in our prioritization work that we will be sharing with the Assembly. I share this information to show you all that each winter, when we do our point-in-time count, we generally find a bit over 1,000 people experiencing homelessness on the night of the pit count. What's important to note is the majority of those individuals are being served by the system, either in shelter services or transitional housing services. This is not the whole universe. This does not include the numbers of people in our housing programs. We serve thousands of people in rapid rehousing and supportive housing programs. That is not inclusive in this data set. But I think it's important to note that particularly in the winter months, the majority of people experiencing homelessness in Anchorage have adequate shelter or transitional housing available to them in normal times. We do see a small subset of people who elect to sleep outside in an unsheltered way. And of course, we all experience that changes very drastically in the summer. So in addition to the national count that we do in the winter, the municipality of Anchorage for the last several years has also done a summer unsheltered count. The methodology is slightly different. It's a week's worth of data. This is conducted by the police department, the CAP team, the mobile intervention team. But as you can see, we have seen more unsheltered people in the summer months, and we do not anticipate that COVID is going to change that trend. You all
Actually,
likely...
if I may just interrupt really quick, Jasmine. Yes. So I realize for members of the public who are on their phones, they may not be able to see the slides. So these slides are all online. If you go to muni.org, you go to the Assembly website, and then go to the Assembly work sessions page, you'll be able to find all of these slides. Thanks so much, Jasmine.
Of course. You all likely saw some of this data from Nancy Burke last week in the Assembly Committee meeting on homelessness, but one of the primary activities that we engaged in early on in our COVID journey as a community was to rapidly adjust the shelter system in Anchorage. We were very well aware that people experiencing homelessness were not going to be bringing COVID into our community. However, due to traditional barriers to accessing healthcare, economic challenges, that our people experiencing homelessness were highly likely to be vulnerable to COVID. The city did tremendous work in partnership with our incredible provider community to practice the 6 feet of distancing recommended by the CDC. And as you can see on the chart in front of you, and this is slide 4 for people following along, in the slide deck, this is a depiction of how shelter capacity has looked over the last 2 years and how it was adjusted for COVID. This particular slide talks about the adult and youth shelter. There was not a single point in time during our COVID experience that we have run out of shelter capacity. And again, that is due to the tremendous efforts of the providers that you will hear from today. On slide 5, you can see what this looked like for family shelters. We have Dave Kuiper on the line who will speak to this. Historically, in addition to Clare House and McKinnell House, we also have churches who participate in supporting families experiencing homelessness during the winter months. For all of the obvious reasons, that was not an appropriate solution during COVID. And so a shout out to the Salvation Army for rapidly accepting the task of managing a hotel solution to help us protect people's safety, especially families with children in custody during COVID. And as you have all likely heard or read about in the newspaper, we are working to slowly begin to stand down some of this excess shelter capacity, both due to utilization changes as we enter into summer, but also due to the decreased need for some of these services in response to COVID. Just to make sure we have a little bit of system level background before I turn it over to the heroes that do this work on a day-to-day basis. You have all heard from me over the course of the last few years that there have been significant funding disruptions to our shelter system. We certainly had a number of conversations about this when we discussed the budget changes that we were facing last year. That resulted pre-COVID in a significant reduction in day shelter capacity and case management and navigation capacity. And for those newer to homeless services, what that means is that we were still able to provide a safe place for individuals to sleep, but many of the 8 shelters that we have in our community were no longer able to keep their doors open in the daytime, meaning that individuals had to leave every morning with their personal possessions and then check back in the evening, and that our shelters on a community-wide scale lost the ability to do the work to help people get out of shelters by doing case management and navigation to community resources. I'm very happy to report that our providers made it work during COVID and used the system disruption that we experienced and the changes in the shelter system to actually find a way to house people in the daytime hours, and also found a way to reintroduce case management and navigation. But I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, so I will let the folks doing that work talk to you about it during their time. You have all heard us talk about the lack of behavioral health and substance abuse, substance misuse services in our state. We cannot ignore, particularly when we're talking about unsheltered and visible homelessness, that the lack of behavioral health and mental health support is often a trigger for people falling into homelessness, particularly chronic homelessness. We will be unable to end homelessness without also adjusting those systems. And of course, there's work already in progress with that at a state level. And then you'll hear a little bit more about this from the providers, but we've certainly seen that there are individuals that have chosen not to utilize our shelters, both during normal times, if we can call it that, and also during COVID. And oftentimes, and again, you'll hear this from experts, but oftentimes this is due to rules at different shelters. And oftentimes those rules are to keep everybody else safe, but this can also be tied to substance misuse. And so one of the things that we are analyzing in our 2021 priorities work is looking at different types of shelter, or whether there are challenges in our shelter system just due to the gaps in the service milieu. But again, you'll hear more about that at a different time. You have certainly felt on the assembly the frustration our community has had with unsheltered and visible homelessness, the impacts to jobs, to businesses, to storefronts, and certainly to people's feelings of safety and security in their own home and on our trail systems. We've also heard a lot of dialogue from neighbors who are close to shelters, particularly our low barrier shelters, because individuals can come and go. And specifically in regards to COVID, what we are anticipating is that we will see an increase in homelessness. This is at a national level projected to look like a 40 to 45% increase to homelessness nationwide. Anchorage will not be exempt from that. I was tremendously pleased at the Assembly hosting the housing conversation on Friday afternoon, and would strongly recommend that anyone interested in this work hear from the experts at AHSC, Cook Inlet Housing Authority, Widener Properties, the Tenants Association, our legal services, talking about how COVID and the economic circumstances related to COVID are likely to increase evictions, which will increase homelessness. So what we're definitely looking at from a shelter perspective is how we support people newly entering homelessness who never anticipated being homeless. And you will hear more about that from our service providers. But let me pause there and see if the Assembly has any questions for me before I enter into the roll call.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, for folks who are joining us, if you can please make sure that you are muted. That way we don't have any disruption from background noise. We are also recording this, so other folks can watch after the fact. So with that, I will see if any Assembly members have questions before Jasmine turns it over to the various shelters that we have with us today. So any questions for Jasmine? Okay, I'm not seeing any from my colleagues. I'll turn it back to you, Jasmine.
Thank you. I did forget to mention, we also need to keep an eye on the financial side of this work. Again, I think that folks have heard this before, but a number of our shelters are primarily funded through private philanthropic giving. And we do anticipate with the widespread economic challenges that not only will corporate, private, and philanthropic giving likely change, hopefully not radically, but we do anticipate there will be a change. But we also anticipate that individual giving, where everyday people choose to contribute to their nonprofit of choice, will also be decreasing as people tighten their belts. And having a shelter system primarily funded by philanthropy is going to be challenging to meet current demand, let alone projected demand. But as I said, let me turn this over to our partners in the field who do this work. I'm going to go alphabetically through the shelters. And so
and actually,
I will start.
Before you get started, I do have a question from Mr. Constant.
Thank you. Before you go, I would appreciate if the coalition could organize a kind of a financial statement that shows the increase over the last 5 years of government support for shelter services to specific organizations, so that we can track where we've been investing.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. That's actually nice timing. There is a group doing a body of work. It is not the coalition, but there is some work being done on exactly that topic. So I will do some homework and figure out how that can be shared with the Assembly as it is completed.
Thank you.
Of course. So with that, if we have someone from Awake on the line, we should start there.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Chair Rivera and Assembly members, for inviting Awake to speak today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of domestic violence on victims during the COVID experience, as well as what Awake has done during this time in our response. So as far as domestic violence victims are concerned, this was a very challenging time because domestic violence is all about power and control, and one of the primary tactics that an abuser uses is isolation. And this created a great deal of isolation, making it very challenging for victims to reach out to support services and family and friends. And as a result, we did see a decrease in demand for our shelter services. Awake is the only domestic violence shelter in the community, and as such we serve a very unique population. Immediately following the announcement and the movement towards responding to the phase 1 of the municipality's guidelines, Awake moved towards CDC guidelines for shelter and the 6-foot social distancing. We have 13 bedrooms, and as such, we were trying to keep one family or 2 single women per room, which reduced the census from anywhere from 17 to 35 people, depending on the size of the family. We used alternative housing sites for new requests, so we were not turning away people. We were able to house people in alternative housing throughout the community in order to ensure their safety and to make sure that there were sites for them to be able to go to and still receive services from our case managers and our advocates. At that time, we also continued with all of our other services as far as walk-ins and non-residential services and transitional housing support and rapid rehousing support. Our crisis calls increased during the month of April by 31% from last year. However, shelter demand has been down. We anticipate seeing that increase over the next few weeks to months. And since we'll be still operating on this reduced capacity within shelter, we plan on continuing using alternative housing sites to support victims. We also, during the COVID experience, we reduced our shelter staffing in order to ensure that there was minimal overlap to protect our staff during this time. And we responded with several resources to ensure that our staff were protected through PPEs, etc., and requiring all staff and participants to wear masks at that time. We plan on going back to a normal schedule as far as our staffing on June 7th, and we will continue to follow the CDC's guideline of the 6-foot distancing, which will maintain our current capacity of 17 to 35 individuals. We are doing an expansion at this time. However, we're adding 3 bedrooms, and those won't be available until November. During this time, we also used all of the referral and testing systems that were set up by the municipality. And I would have to say that those have been incredibly helpful, because we've had approximately 10 staff who've been tested. They were negative, as well as a handful of participants who were tested. And like I said, we do anticipate seeing an uptick in the demand for our services based on the community opening up and the impact on other shelters reducing their capacity, or the services such as Ben Boeke and Sullivan Arena. So I think that's all I have for my update from Awake. Do you have any questions?
Thanks. And I think what we will do for questions is hold those for after we hear from all of the shelter leadership. So if some of the members have questions, feel free to put yourself in the queue, and after we hear from everyone, we'll go through that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you, Chair Rivera. I did forget to mention that due to the number of people interested in providing commentary throughout today's agenda, we are trying to keep everything at 5 minutes. Susie did a great job, but I am going to set a timer as we proceed to make sure that we don't take all the airtime. So next up, we have Beans Cafe, and I believe I saw Lisa and Caitlin join the call.
Yes, hello everybody. Just great to see some of you at least on video, since we haven't seen each other in person. Thank you, Chair Felix and the Assembly, for putting this together. Just want to first express huge appreciation to Nancy Burke, the municipality, and all of our partners who have been supporting us in standing up the Sullivan Arena and Ben Boeke into the mass emergency shelter. We had been operating in phase 2, which was a capacity for up to 480 people. And thanks in large part to the number of people that have been housed through the outstanding work of our partners, we can decrease the number of beds needed, which I think is a huge win. And I think that's the story that needs to be told, is, you know, it's not that people aren't using the shelter, people are using the shelter, but we're getting people reconnected with family, we're getting people to treatment, we're getting people housed. And so it's decreasing the need for emergency shelter, which is the long-term goal I think all of us have, is that we don't need more emergency shelter beds, that we're able to immediately place people into other options. So again, huge shout out to all of the partners that have been doing that lift. We've started a navigation program thanks to funding from the Mental Health Trust Fund and Rasmussen Foundation. We have 3 full-time people working as navigators. We've developed a rapid intake form. So in less than 5 minutes, we can quickly assess someone in shelter for what services they match up to, so that we can immediately direct them to the appropriate partner in our resource hub in the parking lot there at Sullivan Arena. And that has just been a huge win. Directly with the partners there on site, we've been able to find housing for 50 people, and we have over 61 other people that have exited, either self-resolved, moved out of state, gone to treatment, found a family member, you know, been diverted in some other way. So, you know, you look at 111 people that have come through shelter and moved out of shelter, hopefully permanent. And this really goes back to, I think, the mission of the coalition of making homelessness rare, brief, and a one-time event. We are certainly seeing new people falling into this safety net every single day, and that is a concern, because we have people that are ready to work, but we know there's not that many jobs, but we want to get them out of shelter as quickly as we can. So we're certainly working with our partners and looking for opportunities to do that. But it has been, I think, a huge community effort to stand this up and for it to operate safely, and can't express enough appreciation to all the partners that have made that possible. And just Thank you. And thanks on behalf of all the people that we're serving. The environment there is honestly so much better than what we were ever able to provide at Beans Cafe because people have their space. Thank you, CDC, I guess, for the 6-foot rule. But it's really cut down, I think, on a lot of people's anxiety about being in a large shelter, because even though it's a large shelter, people can breathe. They have a little bit of space. They have a room. They have a tote to store their items in. They know the bunk is theirs. They don't have to pack up everything they own and leave and check back in every day. They know they're going to have access to 3 meals a day. We've got medics on site. We've been doing the screening. We've had zero positive COVID tests come out of shelter and the homeless population. So I really think what we've done as a community is winning, and we are putting people on the path to being housed and being self-sufficient. And I think that's ultimately what we all want as a community. So thank you again to all of our partners for your help in this work. I think as a community, we should be really, really proud.
Thank you so much, Lisa. You're getting some claps for those that can't see the video. And with that, I will turn it over to Catholic Social Services.
Hi, everybody. This is Lisa. Can you hear me? I'm sharing my screen. Can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. So I made a presentation. It has way too many slides, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just wanted them to be available to everybody in the assembly so that you have that information. And I know that we are put here in the section with shelters, and we are a major shelter provider here in Anchorage, but we also provide other critical services that are important during an emergency. And so I'm going to speak to food and employment and housing just a bit as well. So at CSS, we have been in COVID response mode since the very first week of March, and we've been and I'm really proud of our team and everyone who works here for all of the work that they've done to make sure that we're safe. We're screening all employees at CSS and all guests at both of our shelters. As with the COVID response in the city, we've changed our capacity at Brother Francis Shelter to 114. And that's confirmed our belief that having more space between people allows for a healthier and less stressful environment. So just echoing what Lisa already shared. Clients seem healthier in terms of their normal viral illness. There's less coughing, there's less respiratory symptoms. There's changes in clinic visits that we're seeing. Clients have more space or are able to seek more quiet space in tense or challenging times. There's been a dramatic reduction in the list of people who are trespassed from from BFS and the campus. There's been 0 for the past 2 months. So I think it just speaks to the fact that having crowded spaces is not healthy or good in any circumstance, certainly not in a time of COVID-19, but in any time. I think it's really something we need to consider as a community. We have the same clients. They're allowed and encouraged to stay day and night. So we're a day and night shelter, all day, all night, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That has been great for our guests and really great, I believe, for the community as well. Our guests don't need to spend all day looking for safe shelter in the day. There's more time to connect with supportive sources, and we've had incredible success in moving people from shelter into housing. And we're seeing an increase in people who are reducing or stopping substance misuse because they have a safe place to stay inside in the day, and they're encouraged to stay with us. We're seeing a lot of people who are either stopping entirely or just reducing greatly the amount of substance misuse that they have, and that is life changing. It's a complete change. And then I think that I hope what we are seeing outside is a change in the community outside with the shelter, with Brother Francis Shelter, really just operating the campus all day and all night, and just focusing on those people who stay with us in shelter and really closing the campus to anybody else. I think there's been a reduction in harmful activities around the campus. reduction in camping on Carlick, and just a safer space for our Brother Francis Shelter clients to be outside safely and inside safely. Making the outside safe has definitely had an impact on substance misuse as well. And I know David's on the phone and he is here and can answer any other questions about that as we go forward. But I'd say at Clare House, similar to Awake, we're putting families in their own room and reduced our number slightly overall. Now we're using all of our transitional housing beds for emergency shelter at this point. At both of our shelters, we're screening, and thank God we haven't had a positive case yet, but we're really taking precautions seriously, and we will continue to. And our strategy is for the next year to stay at these numbers, not change those numbers for at least the coming year, to assure the safety of our guests. We are one of the largest housing case management service in the community, and in this time we've really leveraged and directed our resources to focus on housing. So in 10 weeks, we've moved 188 people to safe housing, and we've kept 280 people safely housed. We're really proud of that number. We've been focusing on that, and I just want to have a special thanks to the city of Anchorage and to the assembly and the mayor, because I know you came in and supported us at Brother Francis Shelter during the budget cut, and that support has made it so that we weren't really struggling in terms of fundraising for Brother Francis Shelter, so we could put even more resources into housing. There's going to be a huge need for prevention and more housing services as we operate the largest food pantry in the city, and we've seen in the first month of this, we saw a 50% increase in clients at the food pantry, and 30% of them were new to St. Francis House. We're expecting a tough summer in terms of food, and I'm sure Jim will speak to this. We know that food is a place where people make cuts during tough economic times. And at the end of, now that the school year's ended and access to those food resources are not going to be as available over the summer, we expect and are gearing up to try to be ready for that. Our employment services, it's a part of our case management services. We support employment, and then in terms of our refugee program, we're dedicated to self-sufficiency and employment. And so I just wanted to make sure that people understood what a huge, how many people we're seeing who are losing their jobs. There's so many people that have lost their jobs during this. We're really trying to stay connected to all of our clients and connecting them to available resources. But I really hope those resources continue to be available. These are all people that want to work and are self-sufficient, but this challenging time has really pushed them. I also have some suggested recommendations from our perspective at Catholic Social Services. We're also working hard to be a part of the coalition effort in terms of a gap analysis and priorities moving forward. We really appreciate the time. Thank you for asking us.
Thank you, Lisa. And now we will turn it over to Covenant House.
Okay. Well, Allison is on the call, but she had oral surgery yesterday, so I get to be the mouthpiece for Covenant House today. So yeah, as we came into COVID, we created a 4-tier plan, which really helped us navigate as we continued to deliver services and made sure that we could really hunker down around our core services. And so we did not have to do any reduction of service. We were able to continue to stay at our 60 shelter beds and maintain all of our transitional living and our rapid rehousing. And so we've been able to, through all of our programs, not just shelter, but to be able to continue to serve about 150 youth in housing every single day during the midst of this. We were able to have all of our youth and staff tested about 2 weeks ago, and so we had 225 people tested, and we had 0 positives. So that was really, really good. Really during this time, we were sort of the immunity response to minors, and so we did see an increase in youth in OCS custody or who are having who had complaints made has come to stay with us. We also represented as DJJ Juvenile Justice had some cases in their facilities. They were not taking youth unless it was extremely egregious, like homicide or something like that. And so any youth who would have gone to DJJ came to stay with us. So we really, that plus, school not being happening really meant that we needed to create a really wide amount of activity in our space, and just really respond to all the needs of folks in that age range. And we were able to successfully accomplish that and help folks navigate during that time. We have continued, we've been doing our Permanency Navigator project for about 1.5 years, and so we have about 250 additional kids that we've been able to connect to navigators during this time. As we go forward, we are continuing. We're working with partners to sort of maximize the CARE Act dollars. We do have some concern. The majority of our budget is covered by private philanthropy, and so we were less than 10% of our dollars are public dollars, and so as Jasmine had mentioned, folks are tightening belts, and it's even being able to do events and those types of things are hard during this time. So we are concerned about that as we start to sort that out. We did have a $1.6 million projected loss due to that, though we were able to get one of the PPA loans, and we've had some other folks step up, other private investors to help us kind of get through this time. But we did have about a $50,000 cost increase during this COVID time as we were delivering services to folks. So we've been able to really kind of stay as we have been, and also take on a few extra things during this time. We've had some great partners on site. We work really closely with South Central Foundation as they're on site, and they've helped us with a lot of screening. ANTHC helped us do all of our testing. OPA has been on site doing screenings for us as folks come in the doors. Oh, sorry, I just got Allison's clear, 50,000 per month that we've had increase. So Allison's helping me out here. So yeah, I think this has been a really challenging time, but our hope is that as we come through this, we can take these learnings, just as Lisa and Lisa and have talked about, that some of the things that we've learned through this, I think will really help us as we go forward. And we want to come out of this, sort of stronger than what we were when we came in.
Thank you, Josh, and Allison by extension. I'll turn it over to Sherry from Downtown Hope Center.
Oh. Hi. Thank you. Oops, that's what it was. I had a little sticker over it. Thank you for this opportunity to just kind of share what we've been doing here. Similar to most places, we've had to adjust. Initially going into COVID, we just locked down the operation on March 14th. And at that point, we had 69 women staying here. What we found initially is a lot of their families brought them home. Some flew to the lower 48 to their home. Some went just around town to family members. And so that was a good thing initially, which got us down to 35 women that basically stayed here the duration. We found, very similar to what Lisa said at Brother Francis, that because they were kept inside and we limited their ability, we'd let them go walk around the block, or if they had errands, we would take them, but they had to be here in the building and eat here, and not a lot of socializing. So we found that a lot of them detoxed, a lot of them got clean, they were sober, they became friends, they were playing games, they were, just activities that we provided here. So it actually ended up being a really good environment here at Hope Center. At the same time, normally our normal operation would be to have 400 or 500 people come through during lunch hour for our lunch feeding program. We moved that outside. So what we told the ladies is they could stay in, but they had to stay in, and then the food line went outside. And we've been serving about 200 to 400 people, or 200 to 300 people a day, soup and a bag with sandwiches and other goodies into it to sustain them. What we've found is a lot of the low-income neighbors come in. It's not necessarily campers. We do have campers, but it's people from 325. They come over here for coffee in the morning at the shower house. We have a shower house entrance, and they get clothing, fresh clothing, coffee, some kind of pastry in the mornings. Then they come and get lunch. And in the evening, we're finding we're handing out about 100 bags of dinners. So there has been more feeding through more hours throughout the day, but we have not had a problem having food. Food bank's been wonderful. There's been a lot of sharing between different agencies of food. Also McKinley Towers, a lot of people come from there. So, and a lot of them have eaten here all along, but we just see more of them, I think. The shower house was shut down, the shower house itself, although we handed out clothing and mail. Our mail has increased substantially. I think we hand out a lot of mail every day. But the shower house closed down, so it was just the women in the shelter. So they basically have run of the place. Then about a week ago, we decided to go ahead and open up the shower house again. And basically what we do is they come in, we give them fresh clothes, and one of the time they're able to go in. We have 4 showers. They're able to go in. They give us their old clothes, which we throw away, because those are a lot of the campers that are coming in for showers. And they, you can imagine, are quite dirty and just really need to get cleaned up. And so we just didn't want to deal with washing the clothes. So we've been asking people to bring in fresh clothing for a lot of the campers that have come here. But that is increasing. So we were doing, I don't know, maybe 12 to 18 showers a day. But it depends on volunteers coming in. We're just starting to see some of the volunteers come back. So our staff has been great. We have had every staff member here every day. We've had 0 cases. Everybody's been healthier than normal in the winter, so that's been a good thing. Our school has continued on. Several of the ladies were in the shelter, so we moved them into the shower house waiting area, so they had a separate environment from the general population, but the school continued. We took the men from the school and put them at Henry House. So they were able to just come straight over here and eat all their meals here too as well. And we kept the students separate from the rest of the group. And we had a graduation on May 4th. We had 6 students graduate. 4 of them already have jobs, and that's been really encouraging to see that they're able to get jobs. You know, obviously most of them aren't on unemployment, so they're really willing to go right back to work now. Let's see, we are just starting to gear up. We're going to do weekends. We decided to start serving. In the past, we've only done the meal service Monday through Friday, but I drove by here Sunday afternoon and I was amazed how many people were just standing outside they just needed a meal. They were hungry. And so we have always had bag lunches that we can hand out, but we decided to go from Saturday and Sunday. So that starts this weekend. Other than that, things have been really good. We have more students in the school right now too. They'll be graduating at the end of June. So pretty much things have just gone on as normal. We're picking the shelter back up to 50. We've been limited. We've had 35. We said we'd take 40, but it's pretty much stayed at 35. But now we'll go back up to 50 to make sure we have the 3 foot of space. So thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Do we have, the emergency cold weather shelter system? Dave Kuiper was going to join us this afternoon to represent our faith community and the work they've been doing in the winter months.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Jasmine, for the opportunity. Someone else is on the phone that I want to make sure I leave time for. Denise Delgado is on the phone because of their role in ensuring that families were provided shelter at the guest house. But I'll just start with how the churches were impacted. As some of you know, there are 10 churches that normally serve on a revolving basis to provide emergency cold weather shelter from about October through May for families with kids and pregnant individuals. The churches did their best for a couple of weeks to provide shelter as the COVID environment started to become very real in Anchorage. And then it became obvious that it was not going to be the safest environment for volunteers and churches to provide shelter, and it was not going to be the safest environment for families either. And so while the churches were all willing to keep working, we made the decision, with the help of the municipality's investment in a space with rooms at the guest house. We were able to transition to Salvation Army's operation of the guest house, and then families were directed to call 211. They received a referral to Salvation Army. Salvation Army provided instructions on accessing safe shelter at the hotel, and then those families were not required to get up and leave every day, of course, because as they would otherwise have been required if they had stayed at churches. So I know that Denise Delgado is on the phone. Denise, do you want to pick up and share from there how things went at the guest house? I hope you're there.
Sorry, took me a minute to get off mute. I am here. Thank you for just giving me the opportunity to speak. We have been providing each family, each person 3 meals a day, including resources so they may do laundry in the facility. They've also been getting, if they are in need of other additional clothes, that we're getting those items from donors, from our thrift stores, to purchasing them ourselves, just to make sure that the families are getting their basic needs met. Also providing, keeping little ones in their hotel rooms, trying to shelter in place as much as possible following CDC and the municipality's guidelines. Things that they can interact with and activities. We are also doing light case management and referrals to CSS, to Clare House, to McKinnell House, to get these families transitioned over so they're not becoming stagnant and just staying in one place, which we've noticed that if we allow them to, that they will. And so just lighting a fire underneath them to help them, not just to get comfortable, but to seek other resources and get them into long-term stable housing. And we've also been providing emotional and spiritual care as needed if they have requested it as well. And that's pretty much on that.
Thank you, Captain Delgado.
May I just, is there still time in our 5 minutes? One of the things that we've recognized is the benefit of that case management to be accessible to the families, to help families begin a housing plan almost on entry to shelter. Something that we hope can be developed more fully as we anticipate moving into another winter, perhaps with churches participating in shelter again. We think that that would be helpful. And then if there's anything more that we can do to prevent these kids with their families from becoming homeless in the first place, that's going to be of huge benefit to not just the parents, but also especially perhaps the children, so that they don't have to experience homelessness at all. They might be able to stay in secure and safe housing in their childhood, and then have a better chance of avoiding homelessness as youth and as adults. So, so that's our impact in our report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Just final roll call. This is everybody that I had confirmed to speak this morning for the portion of this discussion on shelters. So let me pause and just see, did anyone from Gospel Rescue Mission join?
Just real quick, the Salvation Army still has their time, correct?
Oh, feel free, Denise, that would be great.
So the Salvation Army, as you know, has a lot of facets we oversee. To echo what Lisa was saying earlier, we are an essential service that we've been providing here in town, from shelter to meal service to emergency disaster to our Cliff Row Center to our adult day program, which upon as COVID came in, we had to rapidly assess our programs and what the services we were providing. And we had to shut down our adult day program, of course, because our seniors are of those in the protected class that are more susceptible from experiencing COVID. And so we immediately shut that down, reassessed our shelters, and put in policies and procedures. Huge shout out to the municipality for allowing us the access to OPA that came in and taught our staff and screened our clients, as well as those that we were overseeing in the cold weather shelter at the offsite location. We've also been providing case management to those that are presumptive positive or being screened for COVID with the EOC municipality as well. Within our Cliff Row program, making sure that we're still adhering to the 6 foot, then the 3 foot rule. That hasn't been an issue. We implement it, making sure that, you know, all CDC guidelines and health mandates were followed with that, just to make sure that our staff is safe and as well as the people that we're providing services are safe.
This is Lieutenant Amelia here. We also provided a lot of meal delivery for those at the guest house who are being quarantined, along with telehealth, well, really some case management and navigation services for those being quarantined and being tested. So we call them on a daily basis to check in with them, get to know their housing plan, and see if we can help them move forward. And if they need treatment, we try and connect them to the right treatment services as well.
And with the travel quarantine coming in, we've seen an increase. And so we've been assisting those that are under quarantine as well. And with that, our structure for our Cliff Row program has changed a little bit because we can't have people fly in and quarantine with the 2-week mandate, and as well as the different protocols that were put in place with the Department of Corrections, and we get referrals that way as well into our program. And we've also been getting referrals from those at Sullivan. So our increase, the services we have provided have increased by more than 30%. Our food pantry alone has increased as well. We've seen, I want to say, over 200 or so new families or individuals just in this past couple months alone. So we have a one-sheeter where it has all of our information of increased services from last year to this year, including those fundings as well, which I'm more than happy to forward along to you all. That's it from the Salvation Army.
Thank you both. So that wraps up the list of presenters that we had for this portion of the agenda, and I will hand the virtual microphone back over to Chair Rivera.
Great. Thank you so much, Jasmine, and thank you to all of the shelter leadership for presenting and helping guide us in this conversation. As I stated earlier, all of the slides that were presented are going to be available online. So I know I didn't get a chance to read Lisa Aquino's full slide on recommendations. So if folks are interested in that, you can find that online. I'm going to go ahead and move on in our agenda to hearing from the Homelessness Resource Advisory Council. I have 2 individuals slated to speak, and we might have time, a little bit more time. Oh, apologies. Thank you, Mr. Constant, for the reminder. I did forget to ask for questions. So, Mr. Constant, and then if anyone else has questions, put yourself in the queue.
Thank you. Out of respect for the individuals in the administration who are working hard, I will not express exactly how I feel right now. But I just came to learn that the guest house was opened as another facility, and so I just want to point out that every single facility now that was open in the COVID response was in District 1, from Chester Creek to Ship Creek. It's like that playbook. There's just no other play except that neighborhood deserves this. And every argument that, oh, that's where they are, fails when it is contemplated from the fact that's where we put them. So I'm going to swallow a lot of feelings on that topic and have those conversations offline. But I would like to point out that I heard a consistent theme, that the reduction of people in these facilities and the requirement that they participate and stay if they want to be beneficiaries of these services, according to the testimony we heard today, were the primary engines of the change on the campus of those services, which means having some form of discipline and order actually works. And I want to congratulate those who have seen to requiring that the people stay on their campus if they're going to receive benefits and not just go walk out through the neighborhoods, because that is definitely evident in most parts of the district that when people are staying on the campus, things are getting better. And so with that, I'll just leave my comments and contemplate more.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, I'm not seeing any. We'll go ahead and move on to the Homelessness Resource Advisory Council. I have Holly Cannon and Sean Ryan. I'll turn it over to you two.
Thank you, Mr. Riviera, and thank you, Assembly members, for letting us be a part of this conversation. I have just one short thing to say, and then I'm going to leave it for Sean. We really want to see the community come together to find solutions with the service providers, with the people that are affected, business owners, homeowners, and the clients themselves who have the experience, that are in the services that you guys are working hard to deal with every day. So nothing without us, nothing about us without us is really what our message is right now. And then I'll leave it for Sean. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean? And Sean, I'm not sure if you are on a phone, but if you are, you can press *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, so I'm not hearing Sean. I guess I'll turn it back to you, Holly, if you have any additional comments, and then if Sean is with us later in the meeting, we can turn back to him.
I don't have any further comments at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, are there any other comments before we move on to our next section of the meeting, or questions from the members?
This is Rose Hubbard.
Hi, this is Terry Light from Iraq. And there's been technical difficulties for people in Iraq attempting to obtain access to the meeting. I'm usually really technically savvy, but you chose to use a format that most people don't have access to. This is a Microsoft-bound meetings webinar. And so it's been really difficult. Sean had actually gone and walked to a church to get assistance with this technology. So with challenging, I really support what Holly said. We really need to come together in a more equitable situation and de-silo this community, because this is a system-wide community problem, and houseless people are suffering the consequences of our inability to communicate as a community together. So that's my voice there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Rose Hubbard.
Hi, so Rose, are you speaking as a member of the Homelessness Resource Advisory Council?
No, I'm not going to, I guess not.
Okay, sure. So yeah, apologies. We are pretty tight on our agenda. So I'm not seeing any other comments from assembly members. So if Sean does join the meeting, someone please let me know, and I'm happy to give time for Sean to speak. Apologies for any technical difficulties. So
before you move on, Ms. Aquino put a comment in the chat, and it probably is worth putting in the record because the chat doesn't count.
Sure. Thank you. Ms. Aquino?
Sorry about that. I just wanted to make the thanks, Mr. Constant. I appreciate it. I just wanted to make the distinction at Brother Francis Shelter and Clare House that we don't require people to stay. We just encourage them to stay. I mean, I think it's still really important to every person deserves dignity, but we try to create a space that is safe and where they have their own more of their own individual space, and then that makes people want to stay in day and night, and also in this emergency time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, Mr. Constant and Chair Rivera.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead move on in our agenda. Thank you so much to all of the presenters on that panel. So moving on, we have a discussion on impacts to nonprofits, which we've already heard from several of them already, and disruption of services, changes because of COVID-19. So similar to our last discussion, we're going to start with a broad context, and for that we have Michelle Brown, the President and CEO of United Way of Anchorage, Lori Wolf, the President and CEO of Foraker Group, and Nina Kempel, the President and CEO of the Alaska Community Foundation. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you three.
Chair Rivera, this is Lori Wolf. I think I'm going first, so I'll get started. I have some formal remarks to share, and then we'll stay for questions, of course. So thank you to you and the Anchorage Assembly for inviting us here today. Just for the record, I'm Lori Wolf. I'm President and CEO of the Foraker Group. We serve Alaska's nonprofit association and capacity builder for nonprofits and tribes across the state. Before I jump into talking about the considerations that nonprofits need for relief, I want to emphasize the critical role that nonprofits play in Alaska and in our municipality. Importantly, nonprofits are a major economic driver for our city and our state. We deliver essential services like you've heard today. We leverage public funds for maximum impact through public-private partnerships. We invest in our communities and ensure community well-being and quality of life. Alaska's nonprofits are an economic driver, both as major employers and as revenue generators in our municipality and across Alaska. No industry in Alaska can prosper without the strength of our nonprofit sector. We're part of healthcare, fisheries, tourism, and the oil and gas industries. We provide essential services such as early childcare, basic utilities, housing, and food security, and arts and culture, just to name a few. And we are the safety net across Alaska and across Anchorage, as you've just heard. Every family in our state and community is the beneficiary of a nonprofit because nonprofits are woven into the fabric of our communities. Nonprofits are businesses, and during this crushing economic time, we have to remember that our sector is experiencing this crisis alongside all other businesses in our state. We are in this economy and in this pandemic together. Specifically, we're seeing the impact on Alaska's nonprofits in two ways. First, the increased demand to quickly adapt and expand service and delivery options while losing volunteers, charitable and earned income revenue, and simultaneously spending our reserves. Some of these groups are human services nonprofits who continue to face significant demand for their services, as you just heard, and we'll hear more about through this time. Second, we are seeing organizations that have had to close their doors in the name of public health and that have lost all revenue while needing to maintain missions, facilities, and cover their expenses. These are groups in the arts, culture, tourism, education, and religion, just to name a few. Many of these groups also saw their reserves disappear in the stock market, and will see another hit with the loss of tourism dollars this summer and beyond. Even before this pandemic, nonprofits were living on thin or no margins, and those with reserves are now spending them to survive or scrambling to request philanthropic support that cannot fill all the gaps. Truthfully, without significant CARES funding and a generous outpouring of donations, nonprofits will face major changes, deep cutbacks, and some closures. As you work through the ways to improve our economy and respond to this pandemic, I offer you 4 considerations approach to the nonprofit sector. Nonprofits need a different but connected response to your efforts to support small businesses. First, we must plan for the future we want to see in our recovery and beyond. Funding can be for the immediate relief, but also for systems change. We don't want to come out of this knowing that we didn't spend time working on a plan for an improved Anchorage. We also don't want to emerge without support for existing work that makes our community thrive. From arts and culture to human service to childcare to the environment, we need to take time to support groups now and plan and fund our future. Second, nonprofits, just like small businesses, will need support in 2 timeframes and maybe even 3. They need support now for the adaptations to ramp up and serve Alaskans and to maintain their missions with closed programs and no revenue. And they will need support 3 to 9 months from now because the PPP program will be over, most CARES Act money will have been distributed, but our economy will not yet be recovered. And then there is the third group, that those that rely on tourism, arts, seafood, and oil and gas will likely need even more support measured in years, not months, to recover from the impacts of this pandemic. Third, we need our economic response to be holistic and to recognize the direct and indirect ways that nonprofits are impacted and the ways they will be part of Alaska's recovery. Specifically, we'd like to encourage you to recognize that many nonprofits do incredibly necessary work with no FTE staff. Unfortunately, this creativity and flexibility is now being penalized in gaining access to some relief efforts. Also, we need to recognize that relief efforts are a puzzle that require many pieces. Eliminating a group who gets one type of funding like PPP or EIDL is not a recipe for fixing what is broken. Organizations need unrestricted operating support and quickly. And finally, there is more to say, but I will end with this note. I urge you to say the word nonprofit in every communication, both written and verbal, that you put out about relief and recovery. When you only say small business, you render our sector invisible. We need to be visible, not just in the relief effort, but in Alaska's collective response and recovery. I'll do a shout out and say we appreciate that the mayor has been incorporating the word nonprofit into his work, and we encourage the assembly to also do the same. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you, and I am happy to stay for conversation.
Great, thank you. Michelle or Nina, who is next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Michelle Brown. Can you hear?
Yes.
Thank you. I am with United Way of Anchorage, and Nina Kemple from the Alaska Community Foundation could not join us, but I have incorporated her remarks into mine, so they are from both of us, please. And would like to briefly address 3 points. What we're seeing in the sector generally, 2, who in the community we're seeing at some new assistant points, and 3, opportunities that we might take advantage of to adapt and innovate. On the first point, we wanted to share with you the volume and the content of the applications from nonprofit entities that are coming in to Alaska, AK Can Do, which is a partnership with the Community Foundation United Way and the support of the Rasmussen Foundation to raise philanthropic dollars to assist nonprofits and to provide direct assistance to our neighbors. A little over 2.5 million has been raised. There have been 2 grant cycles so far for the assistance to nonprofits. Over 500 applications have come in. That's statewide, but a large portion of them are from Anchorage. So what I'm offering you now is just a snapshot of the view of the sector from the lens of those applications, not a whole sector analysis. The requests exceeded $6 million, and the maximum that any one entity could request was $20,000. So, a lot of requests in there. They came from organizations that do pretty much anything you can imagine: housing, food, the arts, environment, education, childcare, youth services, health, hospice, senior care, emergency response, behavioral health. In short, a huge span of topics that range from things that we all count on for general quality of life to a myriad of direct services to every population and subpopulation you could even think of. It was really remarkable for me looking at these applications. I've been doing this work for quite some time, and this just drove home to me some of the points that Lori raised of how much we as a city rely on our nonprofits as an absolute core pillar, along with government and the private sector, to keep our communities flourishing and thriving. For the most part, the applications have been looking to maintain their basic status quo, meaning keep their staff employed, continue services, both practically in this time of social distancing and financially, and to meet current and anticipated or actual increased demand that they are seeing. It's really notable that nonprofits, as Lori said, are business entities. We just use our profits differently. And while the economics hit nonprofits in the same way they hit small businesses, nonprofits are not closing. They are continuing to do everything they can to keep meeting the service needs of the people who have been relying on them. As I said, most of the applications at this point are still in the crisis response mode. There are some that are coming in more in the second round than in the first that are looking at proposed adaptations or innovations to face the changed circumstances, but most are just struggling simply to keep functioning. Again, this is just a snapshot, but we are still seeing people thinking in terms of their individual organization, their individual program delivery in the crisis mode as they start to move towards a restabilization, but they're not yet in the mind space so much of rebuilding or recalibration yet. The second point I wanted to raise is that you've heard a bit of it already, but we are seeing large numbers of people now accessing social services that we had not seen before. At 211, we're still receiving, as we have been for the last couple of months, 3 times normal call rates. In the neighbor-to-neighbor section of AK Can Do, and in a good number of the people that are calling 211, we are seeing folks who have never navigated social services before. And that means either government services or nonprofit services. We, through our partners, Lutheran Social Services, who you'll hear more from today, have been able to provide rent and utility assistance to about 400 households. That's about 1,200 individuals. And we know that's just the tip of the iceberg based on the requests we're getting. Although we've been serving people from almost 40 sectors in the economy, the majority are from sectors that cannot work remote and tend to be in lower paying jobs. And, these folks were getting by, but they were far from financially secure, and they, for the most part, lacked the means and the savings to weather periods of no income. This community was already on shaky grounds in that regard. We have 45% of all Anchorage households spending more than 30% of their income on housing, rendering them financially unstable. And 85% of Anchorage's extremely low-income households spend between 50 and 75% of their income for housing. In this community, it takes 100 hours a week at minimum wage to afford a two-bedroom apartment, and a lot of those folks are the ones who got furloughed or laid off. And because these folks really took this hard economic gut punch in order to help keep all of us safe, we feel a very strong need to step up and help them stay on their feet. And this is the core of prevention work right now, homelessness prevention work right now. An expert from Columbia University has written that if we don't start addressing these issues quickly, we're likely to see a 40 to 45% increase in homelessness across the country. And that segues to the third point. This crisis has revealed or demonstrated the consequences of some serious community and economic issues, both policy and individual, that we need to address. And I really commend you all and appreciate these sessions you're having to get a good glimpse of these issues so that you can begin the discussions of how we rebuild and recalibrate. In the shorter term, though, it'd be great if under your leadership, the community could tackle some of these service provision questions that have been revealed. As the hundreds of applications we saw in the AK Can Do process, hundreds of organizations are doing the best they can to help the people they see with the resources they have, but there are some systemic approaches that might improve this result. Like the great work you just heard about with moving people from the crisis stand-up shelter immediately to housing, I think there is room for similar type analysis and coming together with some different programmatic delivery that could get us to some better results. One key example is in the food system, and I know you'll hear more about that coming up, but in those AK Can Do applications, a consistent theme, regardless of the kind of service that was being offered, was the need for food. We know we have food in the pipeline, there's resources at the food bank, but there are issues around choice and distribution and so on that if we could tackle collectively, we could probably get more pounds to more people more quickly than we have been doing. So I would urge us all to take a good lesson from the great work that has been showcased to you earlier today and do that around some of these other support systems. So thank you for this opportunity, and of course, welcome questions and look forward to future conversations.
Great, wonderful. Thank you both for sharing, and thank you to Nina Kempel for providing her remarks. We'll go ahead and turn over to any questions or comments from Assembly members. I'll start with Mr. Constant.
Thank you. Michelle, a couple of questions. You mentioned there was $6 million in requests, but you also mentioned it was statewide. Was that $6 million just the Anchorage portion or the statewide ask?
No, Mr. Constant, through the chair, that was statewide.
Okay, so can you give us at some point a sense of what the Anchorage request might be?
Yes, we can get that to you. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Yep. Thank you. That'll be important information to have, I think. And the rental assistance program that we funded last meeting or 2 meetings ago, I had somebody contact me and tell me that there was a requirement on that program that they actually have a letter of eviction. Do you know that to be true?
Well, first of all, the city program is not up and running yet. We're still waiting for all the terms to be worked out with the municipality. But that will not be true for that program. It is also not true for AK Can Do. There are a few other rent assistance programs that do require that. My understanding is that AHSC and HUD is lightened up on that requirement, but I'm not sure that that's made its way to the few providers that are still looking for that.
Thank you, and that's all my questions, but Mr. Rivera, Ms. Wolf put a comment in the chat that also should be put into the record.
Thank you. Yes, I've added her to the queue. Mr. Weddleton?
Oh, thanks. So to anyone listening, I suppose, you know, there were some government programs like the $600 on top of the normal unemployment insurance, and then the $1,200 payment. And so for some people who lost their jobs, they're making more money not working. And then, I mean, is that most people who lost their jobs, or some? Do you have a sense of that? I mean, because those people you would think wouldn't be calling you for help because they're actually doing better.
This is Michelle, and I think Alan Budal, who will be on later, can address some of that as well. What we're seeing anecdotally, at least, is a lot of people having difficulty getting their unemployment. Either they can't get through, they don't have IT equipment, and they're trying to do by phone, and they're having difficulty getting through. There's still some quirks in the system around those people who are self-employed getting qualified. We have anecdotally had a few people who withdrew their application for assistance once they got the stimulus check. But I think considering that, you know, people really are hand to mouth anyway and don't have other sources of income, I think that's pretty limited scope of people who are actually coming out ahead on this. But that's just anecdotal.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Ms. Wolf.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'll respond to two points because I'll take them out of the comments and put them in the voice. Thank you, Mr. Constant, for reminding me of that. One is to Mr. Weddleton's question a moment ago. I have two just points to make that, again, just to stir into the mix. One is we do know that one of the things that some of our nonprofits are working on is that our individuals are seeing their stimulus money being garnished from any number of sources, and there are great efforts going on to help both to try to mitigate that in CARES 2.0, but also just a recognition that that is happening. So again, I think we don't always have the whole story about what's happening with some of some of that money and with some of those people that are receiving or thought they were going to receive some relief, but in the end did not. We also know that the U.S. Treasury just released new information just about a day ago around how the PPP and EIDL will convert from loan programs to grant programs, and there's a small line in there that requires employers to report if they have offered their jobs to employees who then turn them down so that they can stay on the unemployment rolls. It speaks directly to this question about whether people are, if you will, doing better financially on unemployment. It puts employers in a very difficult position. And we are very concerned about the nuance of that, about what, we know we have a childcare problem in our state and in our city with not enough childcare. And so even if we open up our doors and offer people their jobs back, they have no places for their children. So we're very concerned that our nonprofits will suddenly see these funds not convert to the grants that we hope that they will because of these new requirements. So we're tracking that quite closely. I also wanted to address Mr. Constant's question about getting the data from the ACF and United Way Can Do Fund. Again, just kudos, it's a wonderful program, very excited that it's out there. But it comes with its own set of requirements, like all granting opportunities. And I just want to caution anyone from using that data as the sum all of the need out there. It is it's nonprofits who have applied, who believe that they meet that particular set of criteria. It's not all nonprofits and it's not all needs. And so it would be akin to using the pilot program that the municipality is currently using with the $1 million as a judge for all things. It's just another data point. I just encourage you all to use it as a data point.
Thank you. Next, I have Ms. Aquino.
Thanks. I just wanted to respond to Mr. Constance's question that historically HFC has prevention funds that are distributed through Catholic Social Services and a number of great partners in the community. During this COVID response, CSS has stepped in and started distributing those directly. The requirement for that has historically been that they needed to have a notice of eviction. And we talked to HFC and we're ready to waive that. However, we are finding we are distributing as fast as we can, and everybody that we're distributing to has an eviction notice. So there's still a huge need for people who are being literally evicted. They're not being evicted because of COVID, so they don't fit into that, but there's still that need. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from Assembly members before we move on? Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Lori. One more time.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll just offer two other thoughts. One is we are working closely with the AML, Alaska Municipal League, to help local governments think about their granting programs. If that's something that is of interest, we are happy to connect the dots back to AML and have that conversation. The other is I'm also a member of the Mayor's Economic Recovery Task Force, and certainly there are many of these conversations also overlap there, and there are recommendations coming from theirs. I know you're all being briefed on those. Just say that we're also trying to connect the dots back into those conversations as well.
Great, thank you. And a big thank you to Michelle, Lori, and Nina for all of your leadership and advocacy on behalf of nonprofits. So next, we're going to go ahead and turn over to 4 different nonprofits that were invited to speak today, share a bit about their circumstances over the last couple of months due to COVID-19 and any future changes or insights that they may have. Of note, similar with the small businesses that we heard from last week, we obviously don't have time to hear during this meeting from all of the great nonprofits that do wonderful work in the municipality. So first, I will start with Jim Baldwin, the CEO of the Food Bank of Alaska.
All right. Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a loop. Do you have a second device?
Okay. I will just kind of start by saying that, first of all, thank you to all of that the Assembly has done, and a special thank you to Mr. Constant for the wonderful music festival that was put on May 1st. That was a lot of fun doing that, and I think it really kind of, was a good rah-rah for the community to do something along those lines. So thank you, Mr. Constant. And thank you for the Assembly for supporting that. The Food Bank of Alaska, we haven't really seen any real disruption to our service from day one. Like many, day one, there was a little bit of chaos and adjusting to sending, about half of our staff home and working remotely. But as far as our service delivery, we were able to hit the ground running, and the key to that was being able to secure the donated space at Cottonu Center. We reached out to Walmart and they responded very quickly, and that was probably our biggest challenge when this COVID hit the fan. Was that our current facility was just not capable of ramping up or handling this kind of increased response and volume. So that the use of the Sam's Club out at Tacotnu has been absolutely vital to be able to source and bring in, store, process, and distribute more food than we've ever done in our history. And so without that, we couldn't support all of the nonprofits. And another shout out to everybody on the call and all of our nonprofits in the community that are really on the front lines, taking that food and getting it into people's hands. We've been blessed and fortunate to be able to have the supply chain running and the transportation system running to allow us to bring in that food and store it. We are seeing during this COVID response about a double of our inventory capacity. Normally we have about anywhere from 650,000 pounds in inventory. Currently, we've been maintaining about a 1.3 million pound inventory to keep up with the demand. And so again, the silver lining to that is that the food's available. We've been able to source it, store it, and process it and get it out. But the real challenge moving forward, and I want to more focus on the future, is that the Sam's Club is available to us. And I'm sorry, but just to back up, the Alaska National Guard has been just tremendous as well. They've been out there helping us at the Tacotnu Center. But the Sam's Club is available to us through September 30th. And if we have to move out of that in September 30th and we don't have a large enough facility, we have a little bit of concern on how we're going to be able to keep up with the demand. And we know the demand is not going away in the short term. So recently, last week at my board meeting, our board has given me approval to make an offer on a building, a larger facility. So we've already submitted that purchase agreement. We're waiting for the sellers to sign it and send it back. And that'll get us into a much larger facility to be able to respond not only to this current need, but future needs as we move forward. What we've seen so far, just again in this COVID response, is almost 500,000 pound increase over what we saw previous year, same time frame, everything else. And majority of that, which Alan will attest to, is TFAP, the Federal Commodity Program. We run a myriad of commodity programs, from TFAP to the senior boxes to FDPIR through our partnership with ANTHC. But all of that has been just a tremendous network of working together, getting this food in, getting it distributed, not only in Anchorage, of course, but throughout the state. And we've signed up about 21 additional temporary agencies during this process with organizations to distribute food in their communities, because the federal government released some of those waivers, or provided waivers, to make sure that TFAP can go out with a little bit less red tape and stuff. So that's been a tremendous help as well. But I think the real key message here is moving forward, our future, and I think Barbara will address it as well, is the summer meals, summer feeding programs. We are stepping up this week. Summer feeding sites are starting up this week. I think we have prepared about 120,000 meals over the summer. We're sourcing food for those that'll be going out to various sites. We currently have about 18 summer meal sites set up, and I know Campfire is looking at starting those up very soon as well, and we'll be supplying the food for those. But looking into the future is really planning and making sure that the Food Bank of Alaska has sufficient facility to meet the needs, not only currently, but well into the future. So I will not take up any more time, but I want to thank everybody on the call, all of our partner nonprofits, the Assembly, our many donors out there that have just stepped up with tremendous support in in-kind service, volunteerism. Certainly the Food Bank of Alaska could not have responded in the way we have without its the whole community's support. So thank you to everybody.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Baldwin. So just like we have with our other panels, after we hear from these four presenters, I will go to the queue. So if Assembly members have any questions, feel free to put yourself in the queue, and I will do that after we hear from our presenters. So next we have Barbara Dubovich with the CEO of Campfire Alaska.
Thank you. Appreciate the time today, and thank everyone for being involved. We experienced a closure of 28 licensed childcare centers in the middle of March as schools closed, Campfire closed. And so we serve between 1,000 and 1,200 kids every day in our before and after school programs. So that kept kids at home with their families. And as we sort of proceeded through the weeks, we reorganized here and we're able to pull together offering 2 emergency childcare sites in cooperation with the Anchorage School District to first responder families. So we served those kids that first had a parent in the healthcare field that was responding to the COVID situation. Then we served those that were in police, fire, et cetera, literally on those front first responder families. And we did that for 7 weeks. We just closed that program last Friday. And just want to shout out to my staff that did close without any COVID exposure during that period of time. So we were really pleased with that, given that we were running those kinds of programs for the first time ever under the new CDC requirements, the mandates, following everything to a T. That was a lot of learning and very intense. But we're grateful because we'll be taking that learning into our summer programs. I do want to also note that we opened up Lusac Place, which is a cook inlet housing development between A Street and C Street with partnership with the Children's Lunchbox, and offered meals to families there in that community. So we were able to do that these last few months. We'll be opening a summer program there in a very small fashion, serving kids in very small groups for certain hours, but we'll continue the partnership with Children's Lunchbox to get food there to kids at Lusac. We are this summer going to be offering 3 childcare full-day licensed childcare centers in schools, plus our day camp program at APU's campus, Camp Silamio, along with a modified version of Lusac Place. So those programs are going to be offered at less than 50% of what we normally serve through the summer. And that's to meet not only the mandates, the lowered ratios, follow the new procedures, but just where we think we are with staffing at this point and the number of staff we're going to be able to hire for the summer for this type of work. We are finding that the new way of work, and we call it now the new way of work, we foresee this going forward, requires a lot more training, a lot more professional development, a lot more deeper understanding health and safety, many more procedures to follow to keep kids safe. You've probably heard about keeping kids in cohorts, not having, groups mixed. For example, at the day camp, they'll be using 1 porta potty per group. They can't intermingle. We're just trying to reduce the exposure as much as possible and keep the kids as safe as possible. We did acquire a PPP loan. I appreciate Lori speaking out. That's a jungle to maneuver through, and we are working through that, hoping for a good percentage of forgiveness with that. So that's been a significant help to the organization. But we will not know to what level until we get all the way through the month of June. So there's still a lot of unknown there for us. In the programs we're offering this summer, we're trying to meet the needs of the most critical families, meaning those families that really do not have other options. Certainly some do, and can keep kids at home and or have their own provider coming in, or are able to have remote work being done so they can still keep their kids at home. We're really trying to find the families that really have the least amount of options and get them into program. We hear a lot of uncertainty from families. There's just a lot of either financial insecurity, like I was furloughed, but they say I'm going back next week, but I'm not sure, so I don't want to sign up. How much do I have to commit in advance if I sign up? Will I get it back? Just as you can imagine, just that unknown for a lot of families, as well as just the question about, is it really safe? Is it really safe to allow my kid out of my house, right? And that's a reasonable question, I think. To run the programs, I can tell you clearly, we have learned through the mandates and the procedures and the accommodations we've had to make that our costs have increased. You know, it's really easy to put together that the PPE, the amount of cleaning that has to be done, the additional hours, the lowered ratio, the increased staff really to deal with any type of situation where maybe a child's exhibiting symptoms, we have to pull them out of a group, that has to be managed quickly. If a staff is exposed, right, and they need to be quarantined or self-isolated, we have to have replacement staff ready to be brought in. They have to be trained in the moment to be able to be brought in. I just want to stress that not only for Campfire and our type of child care and youth development programs across our nation, our state, for sure, the cost of care is going to increase for those providers. And we do not see families being able to absorb those costs. There's a great deal of concern about increased cost and affordability for families. As Michelle mentioned, you know, it was a problem in our state, I think, for many years, and this has really brought it to light. We were noted as essential workers when this situation was created, but we had the least amount of supports as a field. The state has come forward and provided substantial funding for a period of time. We're really grateful for that. I would encourage anyone on the call to look at Thread's website. There is an advocacy effort to increase the amount of support for licensed childcare so that they can regroup and be able to offer care. We do foresee, as the state comes back under normal operations and more individuals are going to be in need of care, that there is not enough licensed slots available at this time. So I'm really strongly advocating on behalf of all providers in our state to get the support that they need. I do want to make note, as Jim said, Campfire also serves youth in rural communities. That's a large program for us. Each summer, we've seen over 3,000 kids in that program. What we will be doing this year is a very modified version in relationship with YK Health, AVCP, in 25 different communities. We will still be sending out food, and we will be sending out program supplies and support and be hiring individuals in those communities. So we won't be bringing staff into any of those communities and introducing anything by a visitor coming in. We'll be hiring individuals in those communities to orchestrate support for kids and families in those communities through the summer. So we're really grateful for the relationship with the food bank that allows us to do that. So we'll continue with that. The agency did make a decision to not offer our resident camp down on Kenai Lake for obvious reasons. We opted to not provide that type of program this summer. That's a significant reduction in our revenue, a significant reduction in our program delivery services, but we think that's the right answer for this period of time. We're looking already to fall and looking at the school year and what might happen there. And as you know, the districts are evaluating what could possibly happen. There's many scenarios that might be available. We are, as an agency, are moving into trying to model after the district's low, medium, and high risk and how we might respond as a provider. Certainly what we learned with the closure of school unplanned for in March is all of a sudden families with kids in school found that their kids had to be home. Some of them were able to work remotely and be at home and care for their kids. But many found that they didn't have a place for their children all day, right? Where they had planned for them in school. They may not have been connected to a child care center because the child maybe could walk to the school in the morning and then come home at the end of the day. So they weren't paying for child care, had planned for childcare, and full day childcare is an expensive endeavor to move into when you're a family that hasn't planned for that in your budget. And what we found both for the families and as a provider is that's a quick, last minute emergency type situation. You have to have the staffing, you have to have the supplies ready to be able to adjust to that. So we're looking ahead to this next year is with that possibility and that high risk of what happens if the schools have to close for periods of time, kind of unannounced, how many children would be able to be served? Would the districts open up the buildings for us to be able to do that? What other possible locations could we be in if necessary to be able to provide those emergency services? We are also planning for that medium range and that low risk range of reopening our programs before and after school. But all of them we foresee having additional costs in being able to deliver those. And so working on what those costs would be, how we might be able to find funding to support that. All of those are part of our what we call a little bit longer term beyond what's happening next week. We're trying to look ahead to the school year.
Great, thank you so much. And I guess as a matter of preview, I'm looking forward to the conversation that we are going to have tomorrow. It's going to be short but important on childcare, and we do have a thread there to present at our meeting tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that. Next, we have Alan Budall, the Executive Director of Lutheran Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. March, we saw a very large increase in clients to our food pantry. We had almost 300 households up over last year to about 1,974 households. We distributed 106,000 pounds of food, which was 46,000 pounds more than last year. And of course, we wouldn't have been able to do that if the food bank didn't have all that in storage for us. And we're fortunate that there is a lot of TFAP in the state right now. But I think what the more pressing issue that we need to find right now is more client choice. The way we're doing distribution now, we're pre-boxing everything and distributing out in the parking lot. What's gone away is client choice. And so a survey I've done with some of our clients is, that is what they're missing. So looking at ways that we can provide more variety. And I'm purchasing more food now, buying bread every day, buying non-TFAP items that we can put in the boxes so that there is a better variety. One of the things, I think the reason why we see such a large increase in the number of households visiting mobile food pantries, not just the site that the Lutherans run, but also all the other food pantries, we're all seeing over 200 households a day come through our mobile food pantries. And that's because there's a greater variety there, produce, dairy, pastries, and yesterday we had eggs even, which we don't see very often. So, we served 215 families last night at our mobile site, and each mobile is reporting they're up. May, we had a slight decrease for the first 2 weeks, which is normally that happens. And finally, yesterday it started picking up again in our food pantry. And we do have a lot of food to distribute. So that's not going to be an issue or a problem there that I see. One of the things that we've also seen pick up now is our medical transportation. During COVID, when a lot of elective surgeries were canceled and that, a lot of the transportation that we provide for people to get to the doctors or therapy sessions or to surgeries was way down. But we are seeing that pent-up demand now coming back as electives are being scheduled more and more. We did provide 81 state ID vouchers to Caitlin Sheehan and her crew out in front of the Sullivan in the tents. I was not able to staff someone over there, but we deliver a stack every day to them. The unfortunate thing is those people who need their IDs, it's about a 2-week wait to get an appointment at DMV to get that ID. So I know they're working as much as they can to get as many people covered in there and still maintain a distance. I'm very happy to hear DMV is moving to a larger facility. The but the main thing that we have been doing is distributing the funds from AK Can Do. We want to thank everyone who's donated to the AK Can Do drive. We've received about $355,000 through that drive, and we have distributed, through today, we'll probably go through the $355,000, serving over 400 families, mainly rental assistance, some utility assistance. The thing that going forward is, this is a clientele that we have never seen before. It's a clientele that has never had to ask for this help before. And they don't know how to navigate this safety network. So a lot of it has been educating and referring them to places where they can see help. Some of the things that people are having to make a decision is, one lady said, well, here at the end of May, I now lose my medical benefits, and so my insulin costs $1,250. So for June, I have to decide, do I pay my rent or do I buy my insulin? So we were able to say, well, buy your insulin, we'll help you with your rent. That's what this program can help with. Some of the other things, and it's getting back to what Barb was talking about, is not having daycare and child assistance. Is parents, this one parent came in who sat and we helped her with rental assistance. She said, can I just sit here for a few minutes? I have a special needs child at home and I don't have my support network that's always there to help me, that can take my son for a few minutes or during the school day, or that to give me the break that I need. So we're seeing a lot of people that really have emotional and spiritual need right there. So it is sometimes they are just starving for some adult company and someone to talk to. So a belonging that they are feeling that they're missing since they haven't been employed. Right now, the thing that is really concerning to me is utilities. Because we had such a cold January and part of February, utility bills are there's a lot of arrears in that. We have people coming in with $1,400 in gas and utility and gas and electric arrears. And then all of a sudden, now it's shelter in place and the kids are home and everyone's at home. The furnace is running more hours of the day, the lights, the power, the computers, everything is running. And so their utility bills are much higher for now March and April. So there's a lot of concern on utilities, a lot of requests for utility assistance. But the thing that is real heartening is we've scheduled appointments with people who call in and say, hey, I got my stimulus check or my unemployment came through today. Please cancel. I don't need the help today. So there are people who are, very thoughtful and saying share it with others. It's the self-employed that are having the hard time. The barbers, the hairdressers, the manicurists, the musicians, who have applied week after week and get turned down for unemployment. Those are the ones who are calling the most and looking for a second round of assistance. So, the dollars can be used to help people to lessen their anxiety, the uncertainty that's in their life, the emotional pent up that they're all feeling is something that these dollars can really help people. And I just would like to see us get the help to those as soon as possible. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Last, before we go to questions, we have Rebecca Parker, the Executive Director of the Anchorage Senior Center.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Becky, and I just want to talk about the Anchorage Senior Activities Center. We went from normal, which was about 200 to 300 people a day. We had members reaching in the range of about 2,000 members a day at the senior center looks like people are coming in for lunch, they're coming in for fitness programs, art classes, services, signing up for Medicare counseling. Just a very active center for seniors. And the next day, everything came to a screeching halt. And people went into isolation. We've missed our seniors. We're ready for them to come back. They're ready to come back. So we have really had to focus on connecting and making sure that we stay connected. So what we've been doing are Zoom classes for fitness, and those are very popular. And our nutrition education classes are by Zoom. We're still offering Medicare counseling, so you can call and get an appointment and have an appointment with Nyla Morgan at any time. Medicaid benefits, you can call in and we can sign you up for Medicaid. Patrick Curtis does that. We still are doing food box distributions with the Alaska Food Bank, and Alaska Legal Services are providing services for our seniors. So we're really making an effort to stay connected. Some of the things that we're no longer doing are we normally provide a children's food program. Our kitchen provides about 300 meals a day to Kids Corps children who are preschoolers. And those meals, of course, are not being served. And so our kitchen is closed. We're not doing weddings, and we have members who have passed, and normally we would be doing celebrations of life, and we can't. Those are all being postponed until August. We hope we can do them then. We have a gentleman who calls every week wanting to know if they can still have their wedding here. It's really very, people are anxious and really sad about what's happening in their personal lives. So we're trying to do the best we can in giving them encouragement, and we are putting in place our own plans for reopening. We're still working with the state and the city. We've also enlisted to help us an organization called Alaska, or Safe Alaska, Safe Logic Alaska, excuse me. It's a risk management safety firm, and no one's been down this road before. So because our population is so vulnerable, we are taking extra precautions for reopening. We'll be working with our employees for training. We also are going to provide some orientations for seniors when they come back. Of course, we'll be following the CDC, OSHA, the state, the Muni guidelines, but we're also putting some of our own together just based on what we know will be needed. And we're looking at rolling that out in the next couple weeks. So I'm happy to share that plan with anybody who would like to see it. It's in draft right now. So after I get a chance to take a look at it today, I'll be happy to, once we finish it, share it. So uncertainty is a big part of where we are right now. We really don't know how many people are going to renew their memberships and who will be coming back. We know there is some trepidation on parts of, some seniors are really afraid to come back because, they're just afraid to reconnect socially. And so we're waiting to see how that's going to turn out, but we're certainly going to be encouraging people as we put protocols in place to join us for the social interaction, because I'm getting lots of phone calls from people who want to know when we're going to reopen. I get phone calls at home. They get my cell phone number and my phone's been ringing off the hook. Hi, Becky, I just wanted to check in. And I had one woman call me to ask if I would be her mother because she doesn't have a mother. And I went, of course I will. So, there's just a lot of people reaching out right now who need that one-to-one contact. Our staff is calling every day, our members. So we're getting lots of feedback that this has been very positive, and that I've had phone calls and emails from people saying, thank you for checking in on me. It's really important. They're very isolated and feeling very lonely. So Our finances, we've been very fortunate that we had a reserve and then also were able to apply for the PPP. We have not had to lay anyone off at the senior center. And that was just part of our financial plan, was to be prepared for a rainy day. And so everyone here is still employed and they've been receiving all their benefits. And we're hoping that, you know, we don't have a reoccurrence, but I think we're prepared if, in fact, you know, there is one, that we will hopefully be here in 6 months to a year. And let's see. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Great, thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to questions. So Assembly members, if you have any questions or comments, please put yourself in the queue. I'll start with Mr. Peterson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was wondering, where could a senior go to get a food box? It's got more fresh fruits and vegetables. I've had a couple people tell me that the food boxes they get are mostly canned goods and they'd like to have more fresh fruit and vegetables. I don't know if they're available anywhere. I'm just asking. Thank you.
I believe we are going to see vouchers for fresh fruits and vegetables. We usually have them in the summer, so you can check with us. I'll have to check with Patrick to get an update on that, but I know today that he's planning on delivering more food boxes next week.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for our speakers? Mr. Constant.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. I didn't hear you, maybe I missed it. Did you discuss at all your plans for capital upgrades this summer? Congratulations. And
oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Proposition 7 was passed by the voters. Thank you very much, because it means $2.75 million to the senior center for renovations. It'll include our new skylight, which we've had a leaking roof for the last 7 years, and lots of upgrades for our kitchen, our fitness area, our parking lot with lighting, a video camera system for safety and protection of our seniors. So there's many things that are going to, you will see over the next 2 years happen here at the senior center that will be tremendous improvements for safety and other renovations, bathroom upgrades. So
thanks.
To make
and
them
Mr.
ADA
Baldwin,
compliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. You mentioned you're trying to negotiate a deal. I want to ask you where, but is it generally speaking the place that some people have been talking about for a while?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
That was to Jim.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. It's not a secret, I don't think, but we're looking at purchasing the former AIH building right behind the food bank here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we'll be looking to the assembly to support any kind of grandfather clauses as we go through the due diligence.
Thank you. Any other questions generally for our speakers on the nonprofit panel before we move on to higher education? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. I want to thank all of the nonprofits that spoke with us for all of your wonderful work, and look forward to continuing this conversation in the future. So next, we're going to turn it over to our last panel to have a discussion with some of our higher education institutions to discuss the impacts of COVID-19. As we knew before COVID-19, there were already significant impacts, and this is just another addition. So we have two presenters, and I'm very appreciative of both of them taking their time to come speak with us. We have Valerie Davidson, the president of Alaska Pacific University, and Kathleen Sandeen, the chancellor of UAA. We'll go ahead and start with President Davidson.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I think this is, I will be honest, I think this is my 8th platform of during this COVID time of communicating with folks. So I just wanted to double check to make sure that that was working. First of all, Guyana Chair Rivera for inviting me today, and also Guyana, or thank you to the Assembly for your leadership during this pandemic. Before I begin, I wanted to first acknowledge the first people of this land, the Dinaina people, the original caretakers of this land, where we are so lucky to live, to work, and to learn. And we honor their stewardship of this beautiful place. My Yupik names are and my English name is Valerie Davidson, and I'm a Bethel girl. I'm originally from Bethel, born and raised in Bethel and Antioch, and also later as a teenager in Salcha outside of Fairbanks. I have been an employee of the Alaska Pacific University, first as president-elect starting March 23rd, and then transitioned to the role of president since April 25th. And right in the middle of COVID-19, a worldwide pandemic, and I will say that onboarding as a new employee in an 100% online environment has been interesting to say the least, but it's also been really helpful to understand what our students are experiencing. And so that has been very helpful. Alaska Pacific University, we're a private institution. We're on our way to becoming a tribal university to get that federal status. There's a lot of confusion about what that means, so let me just clear that up just a little bit. Through the federal system, since Alaska Pacific University is not a state-sponsored institution, we're a private institution. We're not eligible for a lot of the funds that the University of Alaska system is eligible for through state sponsorship. So we receive our support through private funding and federal funding. And we recently became designated as an Alaska Native Serving Institution because over 20% of our students are now Alaska Native or American Indian. Our next designation will be once we hit 50% of student enrollment who are American Indian and Alaska Native. But we do also consider ourselves a tribal university because of our affiliation with a number of tribes in Alaska and with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, which is a statewide tribal health consortium that serves all 229 federally recognized tribes. And I have to say that being affiliated with a health institution has certainly served us well during a global pandemic. So APU actually transitioned entirely to distance learning on March 12 when Dr. Bob Anders was still the president here. And some of our course offerings have been actually using the distance learning model for years, like our MBA program. You know, we have a lot of students and faculty who are really accustomed to teaching and learning in that manner already. But we also recognize that for a lot of our students and faculty, distance learning is something brand new. And we really have appreciated their openness for taking on a new way of learning and a new way of teaching. All of our course offerings have moved to distance learning format through the summer, and it includes our science labs and our intensives for hybrid programs like the MBA, counseling psychology, etc. In order to keep our students and our faculty and staff informed about what's happening with our campus community, we do have a COVID-19 microsite, which is available on our website. If you go to www.alaskapacific.edu and click on the coronavirus tab, you'll be able to get that information. We did ask students to return home for the remainder of the academic term in the spring semester, unless they met standards for exceptions. So for example, maybe they were foreign students, they didn't have anywhere else to go. It might have been someone who came to us straight from foster care and they didn't have a permanent place to go. And we wanted to make sure that our students were able to be in a place where they could be housed safely. Our facilities remain closed, including the Mosley Sports Center and the Atwood Gym. The good news is summer is here and we're seeing a lot of folks use our trails, the soccer fields, which is really wonderful. Other student business that's normally happens on campus and in our offices are being done over the phone and online. Our commencement was postponed and our 64 graduates who would have graduated in the spring are invited to participate in the fall 2020 ceremony. And so of course the big question constantly is, well, what's happening for fall? And I know that I'm guessing that Chancellor Sandeen probably gets asked that question as often as I do. And so here's what we're doing at APU. We've formed a COVID task force to review and provide recommendations to move forward. And there are 3 committees. There's instructional and technology is one, campus operations is another, and then the third is employee and human resources kinds of considerations. And so we're not there yet. We're planning to come to a decision at some point in June, but July 1st at the latest, to make sure that students, staff, and faculty have the opportunity to plan what their lives are going to be in the fall. And we're really looking at 4 different scenarios. So there's one, we can continue like we are doing distance delivery with no students on campus unless they meet an exception. The second opportunity or option is maybe we're back on campus, but we are physically distant. What does that look like in terms of our classrooms? Hand sanitizers all over the place. What does that mean for our residence halls? Do we offer campus housing on campus or not? A third scenario that I know that other universities across the country are considering is a potential late start scenario. That may be doable for us because we have a 4-week block at the beginning of every semester. That might be doable for us. And then a fourth consideration is it possible to compress classes to finish sooner to be done by Thanksgiving to avoid the flu season? And I know that other universities across the country are considering even starting sooner. I don't envision that as a possibility for us. At APU, our campus is small, but we're mighty. But starting sooner is probably not an option for us. So in terms of the timing, I know that there has been one of the things that has been a little bit challenging for us is that the information that the state is providing versus the information the municipality is providing in terms of which phase we're on. Is it 3 phases? Is it 4? Is it 5, et cetera, has been a little bit confusing for folks. And so here's what I'm telling folks at APU. I'm from Bethel and I'm a Bethel girl, and we use the river to navigate from one community to another. In the summer, we move in boats on the running river. In the winter, the river is frozen and we drive on it with either a snow machine or snowmobile, I think is what it's called here. We call them snow-go or skidoo still. And then, or sometimes by car or truck in the winter. But we have a saying that when the river freezes in the winter, you don't want to be the first guy on the river when the river freezes, and you don't want to be the last person on the river at breakup. And to be safe, you want to be somewhere in the middle. And so I think every higher education institution in the country is really looking at what do we think we can do safely, what can we do responsibly, what do we have adequate testing available, what about vaccinations? I know every employer in the country is considering that as well, but we're also looking to our partner institutions here in Anchorage. That would be the University of Alaska, so I'm thrilled to have a really great relationship with the University of Alaska Anchorage, Chancellor Sandeen. And if you know students who are considering going to school in the fall, encourage them that now is really the perfect time to pursue higher education. I know a lot of people who are learning new skills. Some folks are learning how to bead, other people are learning computer programming, etc. And now, if you have that kind of time, now would be a great time to pursue higher education. And also, if you're a person who started higher education and you had to put that on hold because, well, life happened, or you had a change in circumstances, I would really encourage you to, if you know folks who are in that situation, encourage them to go back to school, consider applying to APU. For new students, there are some considerations. I know every institution is different. At APU, we are a test optional school. So if you're a person who has standardized test anxiety, or if you didn't take the SAT or ACT and it was canceled, or you just didn't sign up, APU is a test optional school. And the other is every institution is different, but at APU, we're a really small university and it is really hard to get lost here. You have to work pretty hard because we keep really good tabs on our students. And again, we have a really great relationship with the University of Alaska. And the great thing about Alaska is that we all work together to do what's right for our students, our employees, our faculty, and our teams. At APU, we did have most of our employees are telecommuting, and we just extended that telecommuting arrangement through June 19th. We recognize and I appreciate all of the folks who were on the call earlier who have talked about the challenges of childcare. And I am so lucky. I have 4 children, but they're all older. And I will tell you that all 4 of us one day were competing for internet capability in our house. We were all Zooming at the same time, me for work, 2 high school students for classes in the Anchorage School District, and 1 student who was taking college classes. And you could tell when the social distancing or the physical distancing was getting a little bit too much. And when we kind of needed that human interaction during the day that we're so accustomed to, we all sort of gathered at the kitchen table. But during our meetings and our classes, we were all taking turns looking at each other going, shh, shh, it's my turn. So we recognize that that dynamic is happening all through the municipality. And again, I just want to say Qoyana Chaknak to everyone on this call who has just gone just above and beyond to make sure that Alaskans are taken care of and that we're just taking such good care of each other. Do we always hit the mark? No, but we learn from those experiences and we do the very best we can. And I know that we are also looking forward to the time where we can safely see each other again, and who knows, maybe even give each other a big welcome back hug. So with that, Qoyana, thank you.
Thank you so much, President Davidson, for sharing. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chancellor Sandeen, and then after we will have questions from Assembly members. Chancellor?
Thank you very much. And I too echo what President Davidson said. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and to enter into this dialogue. And I also appreciate your leadership for, our borough, for the Anchorage Assembly as we went through this pandemic. It's really given me a lot of confidence in the place that I call home. So I've divided up my comments a little bit by 4 different topics. So I'll start by talking about our immediate response to COVID. I'll talk a little bit about our current state and plans for fall. A little bit about the COVID relief funding that we received, mostly from the feds, but also from the state. And then also general budget concerns about the university and UAA in particular. So we were right on track with APU. Around the same time, we also converted our university to remote delivery. So that was right during spring break. Instead of having the students come back, we thought, get the word out. So if they're at home, they can stay at home and complete their semester from there. This required a big adjustment of our faculty because typically at UAA, 30% of our courses are online. That means that 70% of them are in a more traditional face-to-face format. So 70% of our courses had to be converted fairly rapidly, and I really have to pat our faculty and staff on the back for making that happen and the flexibility of our students as they went through this. So in addition to that immediate response, I'm proud to say that UAA also was able to make a number of other contributions to our state and to our municipality. For example, one of our biology researchers at UAA has been studying coronaviruses as a category for 15 years. So he has been engaged in doing gene sequencing of the various mutations of COVID-19. He's all set up to do that. So he's tapped into the national scene on that. In addition, researchers within our College of Health developed predictive models for the infection rates. And these were used both by the governor, by the mayor, by the Fairbanks borough also in helping to plan the response in those areas. We also had College of Health develop a survey to figure out where we had personal protective equipment, where we needed it, and how we can match that up. In College of Health, we graduated 72 of our nursing students early and worked with the state nursing board so we could get them licensed and out there working earlier than they normally would have. The Alaska Airlines Center has been converted, as you probably know, into an auxiliary hospital for Providence Hospital. It's currently not being used. It's there, available. The idea is it wouldn't be for COVID patients, but for other patients that they could move there to make room for COVID patients if they needed to. And so far, the municipality has informed us that they will maintain use of that property through September. We have a number of epidemiologists that are working. We also, in our Business Enterprise Institute, they are a recipient of federal money. They run programs that you might be familiar with, like the Small Business Development Centers. Well, they have been a vector for bringing millions of dollars into the state of Alaska and distributing those to small businesses who need them, also providing technical assistance to those small businesses. We have a manufacturing and extension partnership at UAA, and this group worked with local manufacturers to convert to creating or manufacturing personal protective equipment and hand sanitizer in order to meet the need. So there are a number of different ways that UAA stepped up immediately once we were in the predicament of this pandemic. And I must say, I'd love to take credit and say I directed them to do all that, but I didn't have to. UAA is a very community connected and responsive university, and these individuals just automatically started doing this work because that's what UAA does. We're not the ivory tower. We are doing real research and real work that solves Alaska's problems, and we certainly saw that occur immediately after COVID response. So we also had a graduation. We graduated 1,150 students, and we couldn't have our normal joyful commencement ceremony that we absolutely love, but we did hold a virtual commencement celebration for those students, and we'll have an in-person commencement for them at a later date when we can. So our current state in summer, we are in remote delivery, so we aren't offering very many face-to-face classes. There's some some exceptions. For example, flight instruction, there's an exception for that. Some of our hands-on technical programs where they can do it safely. Some of our health programs where students need to get their clinical experience. But for the most part, summer session is all remote. We have made our decision for the fall. The University of Alaska system has developed a framework of various phases as we are able to restore operations as we move through the phases of the pandemic. So in the spring and until now, we've been in phase A, which is the most restrictive, and we have moved into phase B. So we assume that will continue in the fall, and that means that we will be a mix of remote and face-to-face. So our larger classes will be remote delivery, and smaller, using the Anchorage guidelines, 20 or fewer people or 25% capacity with protections in place, we are offering the option for face-to-face. And now we had to make that decision now because students are making their enrollment decisions and they want to know. So now we can give them the information that they need. Now, I wouldn't necessarily assume that our students don't prefer remote delivery because of the added complication to their lives now. Some have lost jobs, many of them are providing childcare. They prefer remote delivery, but they just need to know what to expect. So we're going to stick with that through the fall, even though I notice that many institutions across the country are going with this compressed early schedule. It worries me because we can't predict when we're going to see a rise or a potential peak in infections. And to assume it's going to, happen after Thanksgiving, I'm not comfortable assuming that. So we are going to go with this conservative remote and face-to-face. We will allow some employees to come back and work if it's safe, but for the most part, most people will be remaining working remotely. We're concerned about some of the impacts on our enrollment. Currently for fall, we're down a little less than 20% compared to last fall. However, it's an unusual year and people are probably delaying their decisions, but we're going full bore in reminding people, as President Davidson did, that now is a wonderful time to prepare for when the economy bounces back. Get that degree that you've been planning on. So we have maybe you've seen some commercials for a new program we have called 49th Finishers. This is a student aid program, multi-year, that we designed specifically for those individuals who have some college but no degree yet. And in the first week that we ran those commercials, we had over 5,000 people come to that specific website, and 1,700 people come to our financial aid website, new users. So we're reaching out to people. I'm also excited about a program called UAA at Home. So we realized that there are many students who are attending outside of the state of Alaska, but all of a sudden they came back during the pandemic and they're learning remotely from Alaska and from Anchorage. So we realized some of those students might just say, well, what the heck? I'm going to take a course from UAA instead, save some money, it's transferable. So we started a new code, UAA at Home, and we reached out to students who we knew either applied to us in the past or were admitted but didn't come. So we reached out to them and gave them a special promotion code that they could use, and they could apply without an application fee. And so within the first week, we had students registering for 200 courses with us for summer and fall. So I hope that we can retain them and then they will stay in the state of Alaska. And finally, I'm excited about a series of what we call rapid response certificates. So these are certificates, quick programs that someone could complete 3 or 4 classes or so that will help retool them to get jobs that are needed today. One really big need are contact tracers. So how can we train individuals to be contact tracers? In fact, the state is paying us to do that work. Other rapid response certificates are technology support specialists. We're all using more technology. Telehealth skills, teleworking skills, infant and toddler childcare. So these are things that are employer validated that we're promoting right away, that people can get started on to retool themselves to grab a job right away. So I'm excited about that and the people who put that together. So general budget concerns. As you know, we went into this looking at a major cut to the state portion of our budget. The compact that the board chair and the governor entered into last summer, $70 million cut over a period of 3 years. That meant to UAA a $12 million cut the year that we're in right now, another $12 million in the year we're going into, and then $8 million after that. And we've taken most of that by really going and trimming our administration, but the board directed the chancellors to also do expedited program reviews and to eliminate academic programs. So I did what the regents asked us. We did have an inclusive, fair process for looking at those programs. At the end of the day, we did go forward with some recommendations, and the board will do their final vote next week, and I expect that those programs will be discontinued. But even with all of that, I am really excited and proud of UAA because of the way that people really rolled up their sleeves and did what they needed to do to get us through this pandemic. And I am, scared, about what the future holds on a certain extent, but also excited because this is an opportunity for us to do these new, unique, and innovative things. Like I mentioned, the rapid response certificates. So we will see what else will come out of this. And we're right there ready to serve. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chancellor Sandeen. At this point, we'll go ahead and turn it over to questions or comments from Assembly members. And I'll go ahead as folks are getting their thoughts together. I'll start by just previewing tomorrow. We have a segment on workforce training, and I'm very, Chancellor, excited to hear about some of the opportunities that UAA is providing. We're actually going to be hearing from Dean, and I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, Dean Runge of the UAA Community and Technical College. So yeah, excited to have that presentation tomorrow. So I did have one question regarding internet and broadband access, and wanted to hear from the two institutions on some of the issues that maybe you have heard from your students and or staff or faculty, and how those are potentially being resolved, or how other institutions across the country are looking at this issue.
Well, I guess I'll jump right in there. Yes, it was an issue, and it hit us in several different ways. So as President Davidson mentioned, we also reduced down the number of students living in student housing for the same reasons that she mentioned, but also our students who are from rural villages who felt that they couldn't complete the semester because they didn't have adequate internet access back home, or they were afraid of introducing the virus to their village. So that was a justification for them to be able to stay in student housing, and that they would have access to internet on campus. We also kept our library, the consortium library, which is a partnership of APU and UAA. So the consortium library remained open only to faculty, staff, and students of both institutions, not the public. So it was controlled access and social distancing, but students were able to go into the library to complete their courses. And in addition, we're very grateful that the internet service providers in the Anchorage area and Matsu, where faculty, staff, and students also live, gave free upgrades to people so that they could complete their work and do all these Zoom meetings and multiple Zoom meetings out of one location. So, we have upgraded our systems within campus to be able to handle the additional traffic, and it's been manageable. I failed to mention the COVID relief, the CARE Act funding that we got at UAA from the federal government. We got $5.7 million. Half of that was for direct student aid, not only tuition, but also basic needs, housing and food and so forth. But then the other money could be used for costs that we had related to providing our courses. So far, I think we're in pretty good shape. I think we've been able to provide what we need to provide for most people within the UAA community. Thank you.
So this is Val, and I would agree with everything that Chancellor Sandeen mentioned. But one of the things I would encourage those internet providers who have been able to generously offer those internet upgrades in the Anchorage service area, some of those providers are actually providing service in rural communities as well. And if I would encourage folks who have relationships with those providers to encourage them to extend that to rural communities as well. One thing we don't want to see happen in our state is that if one part of our state has this incredible robust service, they have opportunities that another part of our state doesn't have. And that doesn't serve any of us well. If we have services that are available in every part of our state and we're allowed to be able to participate meaningfully in those conversations, in those discussions, then we're a much stronger, more robust state. And we all benefit when that happens.
Great, thank you both. Any questions or comments from Assembly members? Okay, I'm not seeing any at this time. I want to really thank you both for joining us today and sharing your thoughts and insights about how both UAA and APU have been handling COVID-19 now and into the future. And that is the end for today's roundtable. So I really want to thank everyone who joined us starting earlier in the afternoon with Jasmine Boyle with the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness and all the various shelter providers that talked with us. That was a wonderful conversation. And then to the members of the Homelessness Resource Advisory Council, and I want to apologize for any technical issues that were brought up that limited participation. Also want to thank the wonderful nonprofit sector folks who spoke today. So Michelle Brown, Lori Wolf, and Nina Kimple for providing your written remarks. Also want to thank all of the wonderful nonprofits which spoke about their operations. Jim Baldwin with the Food Bank of Alaska, Barbara Dubovich with the Campfire Alaska, Alan Boudall with Lutheran Social Services, and Rebecca Parker with the Anchorage Senior Center. And again, a thank you to President Davidson and Chancellor Sandeen. As a preview for tomorrow, we have 4 hours, so it's going to be a little longer tomorrow. We will be discussing childcare needs, disproportionate impacts to parts of our community, impacts on seniors, impacts on victims of DVSA and suicide, and workforce training. So a little bit of heavy and hopefully a little bit of light tomorrow. I'm looking forward to the conversation and want to thank everyone for joining us today. Have a good evening.